After about 6 months, in January of 2008, David Levdansky became frustrated, I think, with Ed and not being able to do Levdansky's audit through House Game and Fisheries, and he simply announced in the newspaper that he was conducting his own audit through his own Legislative Budget and Finance Committee, where he was an officer and funding existed to do the project. In the newspaper, it made Representative Levdansky appear to be a hero because he was stepping forward to do this study for Sportsmen, when in reality, he was selling Sportsmen up the creek. The chairman of that committee, however, is Senator John Pippy. And in conversation with me, Senator Pippy said, I realized that Representative Levdansky could not have written that. It was too technical, and I wasn't being told who did write it. I also questioned why Representative Levdansky would spend 6 months in wrestling a deer program away from House Game and Fisheries to be done by a Budget and Finance Committee that had no biological expertise whatsoever. And so considering that something may be awry, Senator Pippy sent it back to Ed Stabeck and House Game and Fisheries to develop a resolution, an order that would direct Senator Pippy to conduct this study. They did. House resolution was designed to eliminate Levdansky's original proposal. This was the directive to do new work. They actually designed what work had to be done. On this particular side is the first page of the House resolution. It was a multi-page resolution. On this particular side is the request for proposal, the work order that the Budget and Finance Committee was putting together to solicit bids from scientists. As you will see here, Representative Levdansky, not to be outdone, used the House resolution only as the introductory sections. He used them verbatim in the background and objective section. But when it came to the actual work order on the next page, he cut and pasted, inserted, some might call it bait and switched, his original fraudulent audit. So his questions became the questions of the audit. He took 15 questions of the 23 from the original audit that he and Tim Schaefer of Audubon had presented to Stabeck and had been refused by Representative Stabeck, and used them as the work order. Here I'll show you what model is used to estimate deer populations at the WMU level. Identify and explain the model PGC uses to estimate deer population. What are the deer population estimates for each WMU? Determine the current deer population estimates for each wildlife management unit. What are the deer population trends for the past 20 years? Determine deer population trends for the past 12 years. What is the scientific merit for using embryo count data to assess? Evaluate the scientific basis for using embryo data to assess. What is the scientific basis for using embryo count data as an indicator? Evaluate PGC's embryo data sample size. Oh, here. Evaluate the scientific basis for using embryo data as an indicator. It goes on for another 2 pages, 15 questions. They're used right out of the original Levdansky proposal, which was already determined to be fraudulent. However, it was released for bid, and with the stipulation that only out-of-state bidders could bid on it. This was obviously done to prevent in-state scientists or scientists from bidding on it. They expected a few dozen bids. They received 1 from a group called Wildlife Management Institute. Now, Wildlife Management Institute was supposed to be independent and unbiased. However, Wildlife Management Institute was a part of the original 1999 conference that was the stimulus for the reduction of the deer herd in Pennsylvania. They started off, this conference started the Game Commission's program. As you'll see here, in 1999, an article by Ben Moyer of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, he said, agricultural groups, ecologists, and the state's commercial forest industry call upon the Game Commission to reduce number of whitetails. Sponsors of the event include the Pennsylvania Audubon Society, Pennsylvania Chapter of the Sierra Club, and later on in the article, in the view of Scott Williamson, a field representative for the Wildlife Management Institute, those who organized and attended the conference have made an important first step toward progress. With only one bid received, and being this one, Senator Pippy refused the bid. He called me and asked if I would submit a bid. He said he was going to take away the requirement for in-state bidders, and I said I'll do it under one stipulation, and that is that I can conduct an unbiased, scientific, complete study. I'll do my own. This was agreed to. There was one other bidder that bid, and it was a group from Wisconsin, so there were 3 bids that went in. I won't go over here all the details of what happened in the next few weeks, but when push came to shove, Wildlife Management Institute was awarded the contract by Representative Levdansky. Therefore, in my opinion, you not only had a fraudulent audit, a biased audit, but you had a biased auditor. Before I get into what's really going on with the program, the deer program, I'd like to address 2 goals that the Game Commission had. One is the health of the deer, that they were reducing the deer herd to provide for a better, a healthy deer population, and the second was for a healthier forest. From Wildlife Management Institute's own report, they were forced to do, because if you remember, there were several questions in the audit that had to do with embryo counts. Game Commission had been conducting a 9-year embryo count study, and it was assumed that the embryo counts would show that the deer were in poor health. However, when the data was presented in this table, Wildlife Management Institute did not comment on this data, but simply said the embryo count data should be thrown out because it's statistically invalid. Well, there's a reason. It's because it does not support the Game Commission's premise that deer are in poor health. Let me show you. The Game Commission determined that a target of 1.50 embryos per adult female represents a healthy deer population. This study by the Game Commission was a 9-year study from 2000 to 2008. It included all wildlife management units. The average for all wildlife management units for all 9 years ranged from 1.51 to 1.61 embryos per deer, well above what was considered to be healthy deer, and never below. To make things even better, recently I discovered a document that was written by Chris Rosenberry, the head of the deer program, in which he stated, although, this is back in 2006, although deer are considered healthy at 1.5 embryos per deer or above, they're not considered to be unhealthy until it's below 1.1. We never even approached 1.1. What this indicated that Pennsylvania's deer herd was not only in good health, but was actually below carrying capacity, and the forest could have actually supported a higher deer population. Looking at the health of the forest, Merlin Benner, an employee for DCNR, in 2006 conducted a browse survey of Pennsylvania forest. He used many state employees, and they conducted the research on 40-some thousand plots throughout the state forest system. What they did is they sampled how much deer were browsing on seedlings and saplings that were up to 6 feet, forest regeneration.